Mark those calendars for May 7th. And hey, look, we'll talk about the NHL Draft Lottery on this edition of Locked On Anaheim Ducks.
You're Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. Been covering hockey for over a decade, and today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. I'll admit I have a competitive side, and it's a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit on the classic Monopoly. Join your friends and download Monopoly Go now on the App Store or Google Play today. Once again, I am the public address voice for the Coachella Valley Firebirds, and also contributes to Defend the Nest. If you haven't been there before, check it out. They cover the San Diego Gulls. Before we get started, hey, look what I got. I got a new microphone. Yay. So for those of you that may have seen the last episode, old trusty, so I'll really peel back the curtain here, like a lot. Yeah, so last microphone, I've actually had this microphone, old trusty, for 11 years. This has lasted me 11 years and has only now begun to, not be 100%. Let's put it that way. I mean, it still works okay sometimes, but we'll be going with this one from now on just to avoid any future mishaps. But anyway, let's talk about the NHL Draft Lottery because it was just released from the National Hockey League that the draft lottery is taking place May 7th. Now, I already was asked, what time is the draft lottery going to happen? We don't know. We don't know what time it's going to be. Reason being because it usually takes place either during, between two games or before games for the NHL playoffs. Now, the round 2 schedule has not come out for the playoffs yet, and it usually takes place before a game. So I think we're going to wait to see what happens with all these matchups in the first round of the playoffs. Some of them could be sweeps. I mean, we haven't had a sweep yet, but some of these could be sweeps. And we could already see some scheduling happening as early as tomorrow. So let's wait and see what happens there as far as scheduling is concerned. So I would estimate it's probably going to be around 4 Pacific. Just my estimation, 4 to 5 Pacific, unless there's a bunch of games scheduled that day, then it would be between 3 and 4 Pacific. That's typically what the draft lottery is or has been for the past few years. For those of you that are unfamiliar how the draft lottery works, the top 2 picks are chosen by ping pong ball, by lottery ball. And the 2 teams with the worst records have the best odds. This year, the 2 worst teams are the San Jose Sharks and the Chicago Blackhawks. Now, Ducks fans longtime Ducks fans probably hate the NHL draft. Why do I say this? Does the word snake bitten come to mind? Yes, it does. Snake bitten very much comes to mind, folks. Let's go back to last year. Last year, the Anaheim Ducks had the best odds to win the number 1 pick, and they didn't get it. The Chicago Blackhawks got the number 1 pick. Oh, but we're just getting started. This isn't even the worst instance of that. The Ducks have had poor records the last 5 seasons, and every single time they have moved down or stood pat. Only last year did the Ducks actually get some ping pong balls in their favor, sort of, because the Ducks could have easily lost the first and the second pick and moved down to the 3rd pick. I think they would have gotten Leo Carlsson either way, number 2 or number 3, because Columbus was just full on with Adam Fantilli, and the Ducks were full on with Leo Carlsson. So pick 2 or 3, I don't think would have mattered. But they missed out on a generational talent in Connor Bedard. Connor Bedard, who is likely going to win the Calder Trophy this year. Calder, I mean, yeah, he's by far the rookie of the year for the Chicago Blackhawks, even though they didn't have a better record. Bedard kind of carried that team for a while, and he was injured for a little bit. So, yeah, there you go. Oh, but I have to go back way, way, way back to 2005. Why am I going back to 2005? Why am I bringing that back? Why am I opening that scar? 2005, the Anaheim Ducks could have gotten Sidney Crosby. They could have, and they didn't. That pick went to the Pittsburgh Penguins. And 2005 was when there was a new draft lottery system instituted where teams would select players. Like, it would show how they would select players. So the Penguins won the lottery that year. The Ducks finished last in the league the previous year. Remember, there was a lockout going on. So the Ducks had finished last the previous year and could have gotten Sidney Crosby. I think the fortune of the Ducks would have changed significantly had they drafted Sidney Crosby in that year's draft. The Ducks could have won more than one cup. They could have won 2, 3, 4 cups, just like the Penguins. Yes, one player can make that big a difference. So to see Crosby go from the Ducks to the Pens, I still remember that. I still remember thinking, all right, number 2 should still be good. Bobby Ryan was still a solid player for the Ducks. I mean, he did give the Ducks some good years. But luck was just not on their side on that draft lottery. So I think that's the one where I said, Ducks are a bit unlucky. And surely they can't have that much bad luck. Oh, yes, they can. Yes, the Ducks absolutely can continue having bad luck. Let's go back to 2020, 2021, 2022. 22 also. The Ducks just do not do well with draft lotteries. So I know Ducks fans are already thinking, okay, they're not going to get the first or the second pick. They might fall out of the third pick. Hey, a guaranteed top 5 pick is still good, but I know, I hear y'all, and I get it. Ducks fans are already half jokingly, half not resigned to the fact that they're not going to get the first overall pick. And this year, there's an obvious number 1 in Macklin Celebrini. I'm not going to hedge my bets that the Ducks are going to get Macklin Celebrini. I'm instead looking on that 2 through 5 range. And I do want to talk about that on this episode. So what we're going to do right now is step aside. I'll talk about a couple of those players that the Ducks could target with that 2 through 5 pick. We'll get to that on the other side. Now a brief word from FanDuel. And folks, it is winner take all time in the NBA playoffs and the NHL Stanley Cup playoffs. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any $5 winning bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money lines, player props, and so much more. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff moment count. FanDuel is America's number one sportsbook and the official sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. And please, folks, gamble responsibly. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, I'm your host, Jason JD Hernandez. And let's talk about a couple of draft picks that the Ducks could be going after. And I'm not going to start with Celebrini because I am not going to hedge any bets, hedge any hopes on that. Instead, there is one player that I really love in this draft. And on some mock drafts, he can go second. On others, he can go third. Even on some others, he can go fourth. It was mentioned on the off-season quotes that the Ducks are looking to get a right defenseman. And I think there's no better defenseman in this draft, not even close, than Artyom Levshunov from the Michigan State Spartans, who had a great season, 35 points in 38 games, 3 power play goals. And I've watched maybe 20 minutes, actually more than that. I'll be honest, I've watched maybe an hour of video on Levshunov so far, including a couple of full game highlights from Michigan State. And a couple of things stood out to me. One, his skating. Levshunov has such effortless skating for a big body, 6'2", 208. Looks like he's going to probably bulk out a little bit more. So I would say by the time he reaches the NHL, he'd be closer to 6'2", 215 to 220. Big body defenseman. There's a few comparables, and I'm not even going to make a comparable right now, but to have a big body and a big frame with that kind of skating ability, I think is a top choice for the Ducks right now. Yes, they do have a lot of good right D prospects right now, and honestly, they could use more. You can never have an overabundance of right-handed defensemen, and the Ducks are kind of plundering all the good righty Ds right now. You have, I've mentioned all the right Ds the Ducks currently have in their system right now, including Tristan Luneau and Noel Warren. So you already have some great right-handed D. Adding Levshunov to that list of prospects, I think would be, I wouldn't say it'd be needed, but it would spark some good competition. And it would spark two things. You could have all of those guys come up together, and in a couple of years, you could have a young D-core that can rely on speed, that can rely on skating, that can outskate most other teams. The NHL is no longer a league that relies on just brute strength and brute power, even though the Ducks still have one or two guys like that. The NHL is not that kind of league anymore. The NHL is more a league of speed and of skill. And Levshunov has an abundance of both. The skill comes from, I would say his shot is pretty good, but his passing ability, he has a penchant for being 2 moves ahead of everyone else, which results in all the assists he has for the Spartans this season. His ice vision is very good. His puck awareness is very good. The fact that he's able to get the puck right to where his teammates' sticks are, that's a good quality to have for a defenseman as well. Something that you do want in a future player. So Artyom Levshunov, definitely one player that I'm keeping my eye on. Someone that I really would not mind see the Ducks pick up. Another good defenseman that I definitely saw a lot of over the last month because he just won a national championship for the Denver Pioneers. Zeev Buum. He's a very, very good, competitive, high IQ defenseman. Like him a lot. First off, he was a freshman and helped lead Denver to the national championship. He's got 49 points in 40 games for Denver this season. What I like the most about his game is the IQ and the hockey sense, but I'm going to go with IQ I like a little bit better because as a defenseman, he's got a good active stick. When he's been on the kill, he's very adept at seeing where the pass is going to go, see where the opponents are going to set up. And also because he's got very good skating ability, he can beat players or beat opponents to those loose pucks. Again, someone that's going to, I think what I'm going to go with, he causes havoc. He causes havoc on the defensive end, which I like a lot. The IQ. I thought back to a game on the Frozen Four. I think it was the national semifinal where he was probably one of the more noticeable players as far as getting sticks into play, getting his body in the way of shots. Just all those little things. Also, I think I really love the 200-foot skating. With that smaller frame, as I mentioned, he's 6 foot, a buck 83. He can beat most players down the ice. He can. So that's another defenseman that I'm looking at. Defensemen, like the top defensemen, are good this year. And finally, I really, really love Trevor Connolly from Tri-City. 6'1", only a buck 56. So he's got a very small frame, but another one of the best skaters in this draft. And the Ducks could always use more wingers. I don't think they need any more centers. The Ducks have an overabundance of centers right now, especially when you add Cutter Gauthier, who could play center, to the mix. Trevor Connolly is, I think, the best winger in this draft. For Tri-City in the USHL, 70 points in 50 games. One of the best talents in this year's draft. And his skating has gotten better. His decision-making has gotten better. His overall game has gotten better just day in and day out. So that's someone that I'm also looking at in this year's draft. All right. Oh, also, one more player just to kind of get it out there. Caden Lindstrom, another very solid player, but again, the Ducks don't need a center this year. Cole Eiserman might be the best scorer in this draft. He's a very, very good shot. 6'0", 196. Kind of a power forward. Something that the Ducks could want, right? I would look at him as a pick if the Ducks fall to 4 or 5. So those are 3 players that I'm looking at in this year's NHL draft. All right, we're going to head to the second intermission, and I will give some closing thoughts on the other side. Now, a brief word from Monopoly Go. Now, folks, I'm competitive. I'm very competitive. And, I know what you're saying. Yeah, you're competitive. So what? Well, you know what? In Monopoly Go, you can compete against other players or team up with friends in timed tournaments, whether you work together to build each other's boards or you plunder other players' vaults. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock. And there's so much to get, like unique stickers you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with. I like the dog piece. Or you could travel to great places like Paris or Las Vegas. Plus, Monopoly Go feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique mini games, like a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events to help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. Welcome back to Locked On Anaheim Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Once again, you're locked in with Jason JD Hernandez. And this is episode number 870 of Locked On Anaheim Ducks. So for those of you that have been here for at least a few hundred of those episodes, thanks for being an everydayer. Thanks for sticking around. And this is episode number 1 with this new thing. This is a new Shure microphone. I can't believe that other microphone lasted for 11 years. I mean, that's a long time for anything, for any electronic. So I do want to give some final thoughts just quickly about the NHL Draft Lottery. I know the Ducks have had bad luck recently. Okay. I know there's been bad luck recently. I know there has. I'm still optimistic that the Ducks could at least get a top 2 pick. I'm still optimistic they could, for the first time in their history, get a number 1 draft pick. Yes, I know they missed out on 2 generational talents. I get that. Getting Macklin Celebrini would help the Ducks. It would. Do the Ducks need another center? Probably not, but it wouldn't hurt to get the best talent in this year's draft. But I'm going to tell you right now, don't be sad if the Ducks wind up with the number 2 pick or the number 3 pick. So don't be discouraged. In fact, don't even be discouraged if the Ducks wind up with the number 4 pick. There's some pretty solid talent in this year's draft. And I would say it kind of falls off after 4 or even 5. So if the Ducks do fall to 5, yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned. But if they are in that 2 to 4 range, I wouldn't despair. There's some top talent in this year's draft. So I just want to give my final thought on that. Okay. I do want to give a shout out here, and I do want to make my final thought not about the NHL draft, not about NHL hockey, but AHL hockey. And the reason being is you see this jersey that I have in the background. That jersey is now a throwback. The Tucson Roadrunners got swept last night to the Calgary Wranglers, which means the Firebirds will be playing the Wranglers starting next weekend. But this is more just kind of a shout out to colleague and friend Robin Leonio, who has been going through it, losing the Coyotes, and there was the hope that at least the Roadrunners would at least win a couple of rounds and give some fans some kind of hope. But to see them getting swept, I mean, that sucks. The way that the team went out, it is a little bit discouraging, and I feel for the fans. I do feel for the fans of Arizona. At the same time, I do wish more fans would have come out to those 2 games, because the crowds for those 2 games at Tucson could have been a lot better. I was hoping at least more fans would show up to a whiteout. I was hoping there would be more than a few thousand fans that showed up to playoff games. Playoff games, by the way. Then again, I might be a little bit spoiled because I just went to a game in Ontario Wednesday night, and they drew about 7,000, not bad. And they're going to draw more fans as the games go on. So to see that crowd in Tucson, a little bit disappointing. And I think just overall, I'm disappointed with how everything has turned out, because as I've mentioned from Acrisure Arena and even here, hockey belongs in the desert, but at the same time, hockey also belongs in the Sun Belt, and the Anaheim Ducks are considered a Sun Belt team. They are considered a team in a non-traditional market. So that's partially why I root for these teams that are not in the snowy locales of Toronto or Winnipeg or insert other northern original city here. You see what I'm getting at. The Anaheim Ducks are sometimes looked at as an afterthought, especially the last few years. The Ducks are an afterthought for a lot of folks, mainly because of the bad play recently. And it does suck to see a somewhat nearby team get uprooted from the desert. That being said, the fans came out to Salt Lake City. They came out to Delta Center. They packed 12,000 people in there to see a new team born in Utah. So I am excited for the folks in Utah, while at the same time, I'm sad for the fans of Arizona who are really going through it right now. So just got to pour one out to the Tucson Roadrunners. Still one of the best Kachina jerseys out there, but this jersey, from most indications, is now officially a throwback. All right, that's how I'm going to conclude this podcast. I promise. I'll have a mic stand soon, folks. I promise. I really should have gotten one a lot sooner. I was hoping this microphone would hold out a little bit longer, at least till the off season, which it kind of is now. So, there'll be a mic stand, folks, instead of me just holding it up like this. In the meantime, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And we'll be back with another episode either later tonight or early tomorrow. Thanks for everything. Don't forget, this podcast is free and available across all platforms, including Stitcher, Spotify, Odyssey, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter X at StimpyJD. The show's Twitter X is at LO_Ducks. You could email me at LockedOnAnaheimDucks@gmail.com. and I'm going to open up the mailbag. So send in your questions either via Twitter or at lockedonanaheimducks@gmail.com. We will open up the mailbag next week. Thank you so much once again. For Locked on Anaheim Ducks, I'm Jason JD Hernandez saying have a great weekend, folks. Enjoy this beautiful weather. Please remember to be safe out there, be kind to one another, and Ducks fly together.